Okay, the time is now 3:03. We will now begin our November 10th, Circuit 17 Juvenile Justice Advisory Board to order. Let me call for the self-introductions. The members of our board, if you will introduce yourselves, please, any order. Don't be shy.
Roosevelt Walters.
Good afternoon. Alona Holmes on behalf of the NAACP.
Albert Guys, faith-based community.
Michael Bell, community-based connections.
Colonel David Holmes, Broward County Sheriff's Office.
Judge Elijah Williams on behalf of Carlos Rabolo, Delinquency Chair of Juvenile Delinquency.
Carly Shaw Rose, sitting in for Dr. Valerie Wanza, Office of School Performance and Accountability, Broward County Public Schools.
Yolanda Brown, Court Administration Community Member.
Gordon Weeks on behalf of the Public Defender's Office, and I'd like to acknowledge Judge Williams for Veterans Day and all of our other veterans that have served this country that are on this call. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks.
Victor Adams, Lauderdale Police Department.
Chief Cassandra Evans with the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice.
Johnny Sanders, Office of Prevention Services, DJJ.
Travis Lagan, Department of Juvenile Justice Statewide CAP Coordinator, DJJ.
David Watkins, Broward County Public Schools.
Michael Walker, Director of School Climate and Discipline, Broward Schools.
Is that either one of those, is that Commissioner Holness or is that staff?
Hi, Madam Chair. Both he and I are on today.
I'm sorry, is the Commissioner on?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Commissioner, if you can introduce yourself, please. Alrighty, I guess we'll get back to that. So my name is Marsha Ellis and I am your chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I want to everyone to be reminded of our norms, which are cell phones placed on silent or vibrate. Raise your hand, if you can, your digital hand to be recognized to speak. Maximum of 3 minutes per person unless you're making a presentation that you've been requested to make. We're going to respect all opinions and viewpoints of others and address all of our board members respectfully. And with that being said, we will roll right into, I don't see Dr. Hickman. I take it he's at the board meeting, Mr. Watkins?
Dr. Hickman is at Cabinet.
Okay. So, so staff was asked to come, and I did ask Dr. Hickman because it falls under his shop, and the report was that the promised information, which I did know that the on the Douglas Commission's last visit, the interim superintendent was unclear as to what they were talking about when the accusation was made that the district was not following statute. in entering the promise data in the system. And so we have had an issue that has come up yet again regarding promise data that is been entered into the system. And so what I asked, because there's a lot of misinformation that's going around, fingers are pointing at the district and all of that. So what we need to do is find out from staff what members, what your staff is entering into JJIS, Juvenile Justice Information System, how it's being entered, why it's entered, and the way that it's entered. And once we get that ironed out, then we will roll into Ms. Gaynor from the county and how it is affecting the county's civil citation program. So let's start with, I don't know, Mr. Watkins or Mr. Walker, which one of you are presenting on the data that's being entered into JJIS by staff from the Broward County School District. Mr. Watkins.
So Mr. Walker and Nordy Sappleton are on, and they're going to present.
Okay. You have the floor.
Thank you. And I have Nordia on the phone with myself as well, as she works a little closer with the data entry people. But basically, the understanding is that the data entry there's a platform, and Cassandra can correct me if I'm wrong with this. There's a prevention side and there's a civil citation side where we enter the information. In order to meet the requirements of reporting out, we're required to put it into the civil citation location in order to document the incidents that occurred that were promise eligible. So when a kid gets coded for promise, we then go into the system and we're notating that, and it does go into the same location as civil citations do, where the police department enters. If we put it in the prevention side, it doesn't meet the requirements of reporting. And hopefully, Cassandra, if I said that incorrectly, or Nordia, you can correct me.
Excuse me, Chair
Chair,
Ellison, if you don't mind.
I will let Mr. Walker, Madam Chair, please you to finish his presentation. If any friendly corrections are needed, then I will request to make them at that time.
Okay, so I get that. So as it was explained to the district, so if Dr. Hookman, if you can explain that whole process, please.
Good afternoon. I apologize for being tardy, but thank you for giving me this opportunity. I did hear, as Mr. Walker presented the information, is quite accurate that we are following the guidance that was given to us. We're following the directive that was given to us to enter this information into Prevention Web. It is where we're in November now, as we went before the MSD Commission 2 months ago. From that point, we had started that day entering the information into Prevention Web. As of this point, the students from this year, all are entered. The students from last year, all of them have been entered, and we're still working on the students from 1920. And so that just echoes what Mr. Walker shared as far as our direction. And we would, if there is somewhere else, because that was the concern or something that was presented, that we are entering the information into the incorrect portal, we are entering it into the portal we were directed to. If there's another portal that we're supposed to do, then we will make sure that we do that. We are in this to protect the students, and we don't want them to be jeopardized. Anything that goes against what the whole mission of the Promise program is, we're not for. And as many of you know, we've been trying to protect our students for the past, I've been in the seat 2 years. So, and prior to that, this was an initiative from the superintendent, Ms. Pope, and others, and members of this team who've agreed to do that. So it hasn't been until 2 months ago that we've had to do so, and especially with the law change. But I don't think I have to tell the lawyers and judges and attorneys that are on this call that the law changed and we've been required to do it, and we've been fighting it. But
We've been manipulated into a way of making sure that it happens. So I'll close with that.
Okay. And let me go to Ms. Gaynor. So the way that the district is currently entering the data in the system, how does it affect the civil citation from the county standpoint?
From the county standpoint, it impacts us because once a youth has been entered into Promise and is actually open, if law enforcement send us a civil citation to enter, there's a stop there. Because that case is open, there's an automatic stop. The system does not allow us to enter the system. And a while ago, when this was first became an issue before the school board stopped entering it, there was a workaround that was discussed and put in place. But since they had stopped entering the data, it almost became a non-factor until we were in the process of doing the work and we realized, okay, now the school board has begun re-entering data. So what happens is when they enter it and it's open, there's nothing that we can do on our end to address that. We're currently working on a workaround solution. I was able to consult with our attorney yesterday. So there is a request that has been sent to the school board and we're gonna work through that to be able to enter them. But one of the other concerns that we had addressed is that means that under the civil citation section, when it's entered in two places, that means a youth had one incident, but they're entered in Prevention Web under civil citation twice. So that youth had a fight at school, the school board has entered them for a battery, and for whatever reason, if law enforcement sends it to us and we have to enter it because it's referred to civil citation, it's also going to be a same battery. That's for the same date and the same offense. And that's the major issue.
So the child would be entered into Promise and then also given a civil citation in actuality, or does it just appear that way in the system?
So that is solely dependent on whether or not the law enforcement officer actually refers them to civil citation. If they don't refer them to civil citation and the youth receive the Promise, it's not a problem. But if we receive it and that youth is in civil citation, that's where the issue that's where it becomes a problem.
Okay. Let's go to, I saw Mr. Walters first, and then we'll go to Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that the minutes reflect correctly. Dr. Antoine stated the record was not entered for 1920 when I think he actually meant 2020.
Dr. Hickman, is that?
It was in 2019 when we started entering them for a month or so and then stopped. And so.
And they were removed, were they not?
I'm not sure.
I believe I heard somewhere that it was removed, and then under this new change, then it started up again. So you entered 2020.
So let's go back. We are in 21-22 now. So we entered for 21-22, 2021, and we're working on 19-20.
Okay.
In 19.
Pardon me, Mr. Walters?
2019.
2019 school year, 2019-20 school year.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms.
Mr. Walker.
Yes. So one of the issues that I did, and Tamika and I were talking about this earlier this past week about that issue. We are aware of it, and we do want to communicate and look at those specific cases. I'm not sure the actual number of incidents that have occurred. If there's one, there's too many. So we do want to go in there and correct it. And I believe a scenario where that would happen is if, like, say there were, for example, there was a fight at the school, the kid received a consequence from the school, they were input in the promise, they got their promise defense, and somehow the officer also gave him a civil citation. So that sounds like a communication issue at the school, which we would need to address, because obviously they don't need two records. So we need to make sure that in those specific cases, and I'm trying to think of solutions that are with the problems that are coming up, but for that specific case, we obviously can't have people entering in twice. So that would be a problem, and we do need to address that if and when it occurs.
So the consequence for a promise incident, the child is being dealt with through promise. And then if it's entered as a civil citation as well, they're punished again through civil citation. Is that correct? So it's kind of like that's a double jeopardy type situation to me. If you're doing this, I think the premise of promise was to prevent this, because it was happening before when they were getting arrested and still having promise. So this is taking us back to pre-promise, actually, because I'm not saying you personally, but I'm saying what is happening is the kids are being punished twice for the same offense.
So I would like to call those specific schools and have a communication, because I don't believe that that's the intent at the school. And I think there needs to be a communication between the SRO and the principal. I know I was recently a middle school principal, so I had lots of promise incidents come up, and I always had the SRO communicate with me when we had scenarios like this pop up. So I think that on the circumstances that this happens, there needs to be a communication discussion about how these incidents are being handled. I'm hoping there's not going to be a lot of these. And if there are, we do need some training on how to handle these particular scenarios now that they're arising.
Mr. Weeks.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate this conversation because I'm still having a need for some clarity. The types of offenses that are being entered by the school board are promise-related offenses. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Now, how does the school board distinguish between those criminogenic promise-related offenses and those disciplinary school-based promise-related incidents? Because if my memory serves me correctly, when promise initially rolled out, there were very clear criteria for the types of instances that would refer a child to promise. But as promise matured, the school district used it as a more of a disciplinary approach, and it would cause children that did not engage in a criminal related matter to also be referred to promise. Are you also entering those disciplinary infractions into the DJJI system? And if so, how are you distinguishing them from criminogenic type infractions?
There's 9 incidents that we're entering in for promise related items. So those are the infractions that we're entering into the system. So those kids that have an infraction at the school that's on the list of 9 promise eligible incidents, those are the kids that are getting entered into the system currently as of like last month.
Could you tell us what those 9 instances are?
Yes, alcohol use or possession, alcohol sale or attempt or transmittal, disruption on campus major, drug use, possession, drug paraphernalia or possession, fighting major, mutual combat, petty theft, trespassing, and vandalism.
Chief Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go back and, as I said, I would just kind of maybe reiterate, I think, what Dr. Hickman said. The information for promise offenses and civil citation are all entered into the Department of Juvenile Justice's information system in the prevention web. Promise, which are identified as similar pre-arrest diversion program incidences, civil citation, and prevention programs are all in the prevention web. Once you enter on that side of the system, there are then two separate categories: prevention, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, those similar type of community-based programs. And then you have the civil citation and similar pre-arrest diversion programs in the same category. That is where both civil citation and promise offenses are going. So I do believe, and I think in error, just as Michael is learning the process, he may have said prevention and civil citation as if they're different sides of the system. They are not. They are one side of the system with various programmatic components. And so I just want to make sure that's clear. So the conversation is not around what part of JGIS that it is in. So that was just a point of clarification, but I will continue to listen to the questions raised by the our other board members.
So when Promise was redefined as a pre-arrest program, that move made the mandated that the district enter the data. If Promise was not a pre-arrest program or a diversionary type program, then it could be entered in as a disciplinary program, like the say the AKAs would do if they receive money from DJJ for their youth program as a prevention program.
Conceptually, you're right on point. If a provider, a vendor was using the department, was receiving monies from the department, then they will be compelled to enter data into our system, whichever is the appropriate piece. But to the point of Promise, because the department does not support them in any financial manner, if there was no connection that defined it as a pre-arrest program, the data would never be in the system. So yeah, your philosophy, yes, if you receive monies from the department, clients who participate in any portion of our system are entered into our information system. And that's by virtue of our funding. But for those who don't, as an example of Promise, which is an alternative to external suspension, then there will never be any data entry, as it had not been for many, many years predating Promise.
So when the governor and DJJ were not able to get, I'm going to translate, to get Promise data, that is, this is their solution to redefine it so that it would go in. Now, let me ask you, how long does Promise data remain in JJIS?
It follows the public records retention rules. And so it varies on various aspects of the youth's record, but I can't say with any specificity as to that specifically to a civil citation and or similar pre-arrest diversion entry.
So I believe you said civil citation would remain. So I don't remember, I would need to know, I think we need to know how long these entries, because it seems to me that, it's clear to me that you're building a face sheet for these kids. You're building a record for these children. And that was the opposite of what we wanted to do when we founded Promise. I'm sure you were there, so you reminded you. I don't have to remind you of that. But that is the opposite of what is happening now. And Miss Gano, before we go to Gordon and Mr. Walters, tell me now how this affects the county civil citation program when you have a child who has Promise incidences. So let's just say it's a Promise incident, it's not a civil citation, but it's in there and it's still open. So then they actually get, or you want to offer them, or they've been offered a civil citation for a different incident. Has that affected your work at all?
So, I believe if it's issued for the same offense and is open and we try to enter it, that's where the issue is. But if the youth had a Promise in the system and maybe it's closed, maybe we get them for a civil citation that's not school related, we would be able to enter it.
And so what happens if you find out, by the time you get it, the kid is in promise. And so he or she is there, they're at the site, they're going through the program. And now the officer from Coral Springs decided, this is a civil citation, I want this kid to be promised, I've issued it, this is where we are. What happens? So the kid then has to complete promise successfully and then complete civil citation successfully for the same incident that he or she was accused of committing?
So when we're looking at it, we're only looking at the civil citation portion of it. So if they're enrolled in civil citation, we're going to treat them like any other youth that has been enrolled in civil citation. The promise piece of it, we know that it's in there. If it's open and it's the same offense, it will put a halt to us until we create another process to get through that piece. But other than that, if we can enter it, we're not really looking at what they are doing with promise. We're treating it separate. We're only looking at the civil citation piece of it. Because if they're unsuccessful with promise, that doesn't hinder them from participating in civil citation, even for the current offense or a subsequent offense.
And so if I guess to Mr. Watkins or any other district, so if a parent comes to you and they say, Dr. Hickman, my child has already been punished through the system, they're in promise, they're out of their homeschool, they're doing this whole thing, so why then do we have to do this other piece with civil citation? I mean, is there anything does the district have a concern about the child being punished twice for the same incident?
So I'll start, and I'll echo the concerns. And I'm obviously troubled by what is happening with the double whammy that they're getting. I think one of the challenges that the district faces and has faced for a long time is that very few of the law enforcement agencies have ever signed on to promise. And by not being a signatory, they're under no obligation to honor or respect the decisions that schools make regarding disciplinary action. Subsequent to that, for those that are signatories, you've already outlined sometimes the miscommunication, and then even within those agreed municipalities, law enforcement does not give up discretion to then subsequently send a civil citation recommendation, though that goes against the spirit of what promise was about in the beginning. So we do have some dynamics that we still have to address. And I think this conversation, it needs to be carried forward to look at that more intently.
Okay.
I would just like to, the way Mr. Watkins started off is the way I was going to start off as well. Your question was, are we concerned? So most definitely we're concerned that there is I have to go back and ask the question, is it a double whammy, or does it give the appearance to law enforcement that it is a double whammy, right? So my first answer is yes, we're concerned, and no, we don't want it to happen because it's going against the whole purpose of the founding of Promise. Although I wasn't here for when it was founded, but from the history lessons that I've been given, we are going against what Promise was designed to do. And so we're going to have to make some decisions about how to move forward to protect our kids and to maintain a structure that provides a student who has an infraction to be able to provide them with some therapeutic intervention, some opportunities to return to school, some social justice, some things that they need to grow so that they can return and not to come back. And it goes to, we have to, I'm tap dancing because I know how the roots go. It's really deep in this program, but if we want to call it an alternative to external suspension program, which it is, then we may have to make some adjustments to make it just that.
Before I go to law enforcement, because Mr. Watkins, you have a good point. Let me just take a few of these questions here. Mr. Walters, and then Mr. Weeks, Ms. Gaynor, and then Chief Evans in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just let me say to Dr. Antoine, once upon a time, we only had one bite at the apple. And we fought that for about a year, and they decided to let us have 3 bites at the apple. So not only when they are looking at the 2 programs for one incident and being charged in each one of them, that means now we are back down to just 2 bites of the apple. That's one thing. For Director Evans, when a person, Roosevelt, yesterday entered information on little Roosevelt into the system, and I decided today that I didn't put everything I wanted in there. Do I have the ability to go back and change what I put in yesterday?
Madam Chair, would you like me to respond? Yes, Mr. Walters, that if an error is made in JGIS, the record is still open. We have the ability to correct data at any point in time in its presentation within the department. Madam Chair, I would like to also, I think I want to make sure that we have the most accurate information as we proceed in the conversation. So if you don't mind, I would like to share a friendly correction to something that was already stated.
Go ahead.
Okay. The prevention web is by its design is to allow a young person to have one placement in the prevention web at a time. The experience that we're having with Promise is not indicative of the fact that it's Promise. It is that the prevention web is designed solely for a single placement, unlike the delinquency web, which will accept multiple placements simultaneously in any part of the state, and to include interstate compact cases. So what we are experiencing, even with Promise, is something we would experience if a young person had been granted 2 civil citation opportunities in different counties, or 2 civil citation opportunities in the same county by different programs if we were a county that had multiple civil citation programs, say in a Circuit 19 that have multiple counties. So I want to make sure that it's not because it's Promise, it's because the system is designed, one youth in the prevention web equals one placement in the prevention web. And so because civil citation is there, the department is looking at should that caveat be lifted from a programmatic standpoint in JGIS to allow multiple placements, which means the stop that the Office of Justice Services is experiencing would not happen. That does not take away from the concern of the single incident getting 2 interventions. But I do want to just say clearly that it is the system design and not anything related to the specific program or Promise and its commingling or being in the same section of civil citation.
Chief, I'm going to push back on that. It may not be coming out of your office over on Cypress, but that is exactly the opposite of what's happening, what's coming out of the Tallahassee. All those things were targeted toward the Promise program. So I understand from where you sit, that's the case, but that is not the case. Only from where you sit.
I'm going to respectfully, Madam Chair, I'm going to disagree because we'll
agree to disagree, because I know about conversations that happened in Tallahassee, and I know that Promise has been targeted, and I know that there's been a big effort to get the data. And I know that the chair of the Douglas Commission specifically said the data should be entered, and the officers should use that as a way to track the children that are in there. And most of the children that from the data I've seen do look like me. So from where you sit, I get that. But that's not what has been directed from our folk that are in Tallahassee and what I've heard with my own ears. But I understand what you're saying from the DJJ space, but that's not it. This program has been targeted.
Absolutely, I'm not disagreeing with the impact of MSD and the subsequent legislation. I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I'm saying is prior to that, the system design was that. So it was not designed that way in its intention, in its original inception, being one of those folks who was part of the envisioning piece. But the post MSD process has changed the landscape of the data entry process. So that's what my point of disagreement would be. But I mean, when you say Tallahassee, I just want a point of clarification. Are you speaking of the department? Or are you speaking of the legislation that was?
Speaking of from where the governor sits and this current secretary of DJJ.
Gotcha.
They are
All right,
all.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. But
All
I
right,
do,
thank you,
you
ma'am.
are correct, because I believe initially when civil citation was started, they were all entering into the one web. There was no prevention web, and then there was a movement to realize that having civil citations mixed with diversions and the other, that was not working. And so then DJJ created the prevention side so that they could separate, so the two would not be together on that whole piece. But it has grown into what we have now. And I believe that you were asked previously, Chief, to find out if DJJ had an interest in updating or changing your database to reflect, promise or something like that, because we had a similar problem or this same problem. And the answer to you was no.
That was when I first presented. I have since submitted some additional considerations for data updates to reflect the system design that was done in the 90s to where we are currently. But civil citation, being on the delinquency side of the system, was done in the 90s, early 2000s. The prevention web did exist, but it was not designed that way to go in there. So it's been a lot of evolution in JGIS. And I think we're at another juncture where that needs to happen. But I have just recently had a conversation with the Deputy Secretary on some necessary modifications to keep us in line with the current Florida statutes, which includes not quantifying the number of civil citations. That's a major one that needs to happen.
Mr. Weeks.
Madam President, I had one other question.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Walters.
Okay, and it's again for our director. When I'm making my second entry, my corrective interest into the system, because I kind of screwed up yesterday, what information is available for me to review on any of the cases in the system?
It would take you back. You would go back and you would search that individual record, and the system allows you to edit what was presented, and it looks the same way. You could typically, depending on what portal you're in, you could see all the information, or you can go back to a specific module and update, say the youth's name or an address. We have specific functional modules, but you will be able to see the entire record that you've entered. If you're unable to make an edit, then we have a data integrity team statewide who's able to make those adjustments.
Little Marshall while I'm in there?
Can you do what?
Could I peek at Little Marshall while I'm in there?
If Little Marshall was not in your program, then you can only see the face sheet, the output data. You're not able to actually see the data entry piece.
Thank you very much.
What if he was law enforcement?
Law enforcement only sees the output data, which is the face sheet. They're not able to see who entered it, things like that. They see the
I'm in there. Little Marshall's in there though.
Mm-hmm. They're able to see. That was based on, I believe, the 2018 update of JGIS. They're able to see through CJNet. They're able to see a delinquency face sheet with a youth's picture. They're able to see a prevention face sheet. They're able to see a civil citation face sheet, or they can select a new option, which is a combined face sheet, and all of that information about one youth will be consolidated and available in print.
Thank you. Mr. Wicks.
You're welcome.
Madam President, one of the things I gotta remind myself how we got here today. When this started pre-promise, I'm talking about before we had a promise program, before we had a civil citation program, if a child engaged in misbehavior within a school that did not result in arrest, was the department able to have access to that information?
What was DJJ?
Yes.
If a young person that did not result in arrest, then we would have never seen it.
So, and the reason I go all the way back to this is because The whole purpose behind Promise was to minimize the footprint for a child in the eyes of law enforcement so that we can give children opportunities to be children and grow without having the burden of an arrest on them for the rest of their life. They have taken basically the good work and the goodwill of this community and trying to embody that sentiment through Promise and totally destroyed it, turned it up on its head, and now have access to information they otherwise would not have had. And this is utterly and totally offensive to me. It is offensive that you take what was the intention to help children be able to proceed forward, and you use it as a data grab to create a face sheet and a rap sheet for a child to carry them all the way through high school. Now, law enforcement in the field can get a glimpse as to what kind of kid this is in school. And that's not fair. That's not fair on any stretch of the imagination. I don't care what tragedy you use to justify what you're trying to do. You are criminalizing children. And I want to be on record and publicly stating what it is from what it is, because it's offensive, because I remember how this started. I remember where it was before. And now I'm seeing where it's at now. And all I see is that police officers now have more information today to penalize children, to then act upon arrest where they otherwise would have given grace. And that's all we asked for, was a little bit of compassion for children, because we know other communities were getting that same compassion. It's offensive. And I want that outrage to be heard, because, you know, we are being very polite in our dialogue, polite in our questioning. But what's happening to us and what's happening to our community, what's happening to this Promise program is utterly offensive. It's offensive. We should not be playing these political games with legislators in Tallahassee that are trying to pass laws to try to capture more data for police to criminalize our children. We took a good program that was helping kids, helped thousands of kids turn their life around. And now they're creating rap sheets for our next generation of children coming out of 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. It's foolishness. And I'm offended that they took this good work of this community and turned it on the head for the state of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks. Judge Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Weeks, I have to tell you, I share your sentiment. But like I say, and don't take this the wrong way, but we are the Dr. Frankenstein. We've got to deal with what we've created. And if I take a look at what happened to me last Thursday, I get a sense of what's happening. I go over to Promise hearings at the school board. I get this little girl there. I find out that the girl is already in dependency court. She also was in girls' court in front of Judge Ross as well as Judge Schulman. I've got her in the Promise program, and the girl's already been charged. So we've got 3 different databases with the same child, with the same so-called HT issue. All we're doing is creating databases for these children, and we've all, I should say myself, are all a part of it to some extent. So I'm reaching out to the other judges saying, how do we have this child in 3 different databases, 3 different people getting stats for the same child with the same issue? It's a mess. But Dr. Watkins, I rarely take issue with you, but I will take issue with this. When you say that most of the law enforcement have not signed on to the Promise program, I will concede that that's true. The only problem is that the Promise program reduced arrests by 90%. At least that was the data I was given a couple of years ago. So certainly, in order to make the program work, we don't need a whole heap of law enforcement officers involved in the so-called program. But what I'm concerned with is what I saw in a trial that happened to me 2 days ago, where I got a 13-year-old girl in a school fight with a 12-year-old girl. I got 1,500 kids, all spectators, taking photographs with cameras. And I'm thinking to myself, why wasn't this child in the Promise program? Because it was the child's first offense, and it's a 13-year-old fighting with a 12-year-old. So I have to figure out, like, what's going on here. I guess I'll end this by saying, Dr. Higgs, is your general counsel aware of the fact that you've got this major miscommunication problem? Because I've been general counsel in major organizations. It's a matter of general counsel saying one input, one per child, per the system. That's it. One input per child, per the system. So when you say that we're told, my question becomes, who is the we that's telling you anything? Because your general counsel is the one that will tell you it should be one person, one dean per child. That's what's throwing me off in this argument.
My response, Judge Williams, to what you just asked was, one, our interim general counsel, as well as our interim superintendent, and the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission. You asked where the guidance came from and where the directive came from. That's where it came from. Now, the concern I have is we're entering it once. That's all. That's what we're entering.
Mr. Watkins.
I think when I go back to and I love Judge Williams, and he is absolutely right. It is not often that we might sit on the opposite side of the coin, but I also take the position that about 6 years ago, though many of the law enforcement agencies had not signed on, did not give up their discretion, and still could choose to do what they wanted to do. For the most part, they stood down, and they allowed the district and the program to live. I think in the last few years, the dog whistle was called, and I think what we're going to continue to see is the uptick in the last 6 years and moving forward. So I am concerned still that when now the dog whistle has been called and the discretion to the ability to exercise more punitive measures that will disproportionately impact Black and brown children is my concern. And unless they will formally agree that they will honor what we said out years ago, then we are still at risk of a lot of kids getting hurt.
Okay, I'd love to hear from law enforcement. And we know that from its inception of Promise, both BSO and Fort Lauderdale were at the table. So on this issue of these children and double jeopardy and double punishment and all that, where is BSO, Colonel Holmes?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, other board members. You brought up a good point. Under the previous administration, the Promise program was very, very active. And it was somewhat of what we consider a freebie. I think the agency and the school board worked closely together to make sure the diversionary program worked and prevented the kids from having a record. Since then, we've kind of, since the change of the administration, we kind of shifted more to the civil citation aspect of the diversionary program. And what we're seeing now, and the information that I'm getting now, basically is that when information is entered into the portal from the Promise program, if it's coming out to our deputies just like a civil citation, then it makes it very, very difficult. It's definitely a double jeopardy situation because our deputies are seeing it as 2 civil citations back to back. And that could create a serious problem, especially if a kid is borderline and previously being part of a Promise program, from the past administrations, it would be considered a freebie. So that's something that we really need to look at. We need to dig deep into making sure that there isn't double jeopardy and that the cases are evaluated properly. And from a law enforcement perspective, we have a lot of young deputies too that we're continuing to educate on the civil citation program to make sure that they evaluate things properly. But when they're confronted with a situation where there's multiple civil citations back to back to back because of how the information is stored into the program, I can definitely see how it creates problems. We have to improve that.
Okay. London, Major London.
Yeah, our SROs have the position that if it's handled by promise, we don't issue civil citations. It's either one or the other.
And is there any type of, so if let's say for instance, somehow one got through, and so the kid has promise and he also has civil citation, if Miss Gaynor realizes that is the case, would she, if she called over to her designated person over at Fort Lauderdale, would they then, I don't know, for lack of a better word, rescind the civil citation and let promise go through, or how would that work?
I don't think we would have a role in that because the form would already have been sent over. So whatever mechanisms they have in place on that side of the house could trigger whatever needs to happen to prevent the dual jeopardy.
Ms. Gaynor? You're muted, ma'am.
I was going to say that in rare cases, there have been cases where law enforcement would send over a civil citation, and for whatever reason, they have a video and they say, hey, this kid shouldn't have got anything, then they would ask for us to rescind that civil citation. We do have a process in place where we notify the Department of Juvenile Justice data integrity officer and ask them to remove it because the officer has rescinded it. And specifically for 3 cases that we've received recently that were promised use and were also referred to civil citation, one of the things we did was we notified the contact and say, hey, we received these civil citations. Are you aware that they were, can you find out if the officer is aware that this youth also was placed in promise? In 2 of those cases, the officers rescinded those citations. In one of those cases, the officer did not care. He wanted the youth to go through civil citation. So we end up having to hold that one. But there is a process in place if law enforcement makes the decision that for whatever reason, they want to rescind the citation.
And Colonel, so in a case with SO, if you receive that phone call or into that, you know, where if your guys were aware that, or is there a policy in place for similar to Fort Lauderdale? So if a child is already enrolled in promise, and your deputies, are they continuing civil citation? Is there something that you could do to rescind that if need be?
Yes, we definitely have our protocols in place. If we received a call and our deputy was informed that they were already part of a program, whether it's promise or not, they would definitely be able to rescind it. That is one of the areas too where, you know, like I stated earlier, we can't afford to have the double jeopardy situation. You know, our protocols, and it came from the top, from the sheriff, especially with the civil citation program. We take it very seriously, and we have our supervisors monitoring all the civil citations that are issued by our deputies as well. And I know we're going to get into a little bit later with the numbers and all, but we've done light years of improvement with monitoring that because, you know, we made it a priority to make sure. But once again, when you have inexperienced people that see 3 citations back to back to back, it creates a problem.
Thank you. Judge Holmes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question for the stateside people. People that are in IT know how to make different columns all the time. When I was in the court system, I just called and said, we need a column for this on this dispo, and it was added. So, when you're looking at discriminatory intent, you can't tell all the time by the actions. You can also look at the inaction of the actors. If they don't want to create a non-civil citation column, and that's all it's called, civil citation, you check, non-civil citation, that puts people on notice that it may be the YMCA or the AKAs or the Omegas, it's a program. But my concern is law enforcement, if we're lumping it all together and they see that the child is in 2 programs, that's 2 civil citations that they're thinking of. And by statute, the child only gets 3. That's the maximum. So that's counting towards their 3 chances to make good, when all it takes is just a software change, in my mind, just to make things easier. So I mean, it doesn't take debate on the floor. It doesn't do anything like that. Just create a column that says non-civil citation, but it's still on the prevention side. If you're using the program prevention web, that column couldn't be added, so that you got some checks, but you'll know that it's not 2 civil citations, and that will certainly help the county also. Because Ms. Gaynor says that their program stops when there's a program open, such as Promise. That could easily be remedied by just adding a column. In my mind, I mean, I think of labor-saving technology. No, we don't have to pass a bill or nothing like that. Just create a column that says it's not civil citation, and that way the child is not penalized. So thank you for the space, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Judge. So we have an issue, as the Colonel alluded to, as far as training. Now, the chair of the Douglas Commission, which is the sheriff of Pinellas County, said that the reason he wanted, and the Douglas Commission wanted, as he spoke for them, wanted the data in JJIS is so that when an officer encounters a child on the street, he or she could go into the system, look at what's there, and determine whether they're going to make an arrest. So if you have an officer, first of all, training all these people all over the state of Florida is going to be a chore, to look at one of these face sheets and understand that it is that Kappa Ligas is not a gang, that is actually a youth situation, and that it's not Promise and whatever it is. So seeing all of those, they're just going to see all these different programs that the kid may have participated in. Not all of them are programs such as a Promise program. They're not going to know the difference. They would just make the calls. It's like, well, this kid has been in trouble all the time, and so yes, I'm going to arrest this kid. And then number 2, of course, it allows the law enforcement officer to track the children. Those are his words, not mine. So I concur that would be I believe it would make a big difference if it were clear on which program was which and what was the object of the game when you're trying to do this data piece there. Commissioner Holness, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a question for Ms. Gaynor. Which department was it that on the 3rd civil citation that refused to allow for Promise to be utilized?
Let me get right back to you, okay? I believe I know, but let me verify.
Thank you. It is sad that we're having these kind of discussions still, when all the evidence and all the data shows that there's a better way to deal with our children and our youth, rather than locking them up or putting them in prison or jeopardizing their future. That we're weaker as a nation the more people we put in prison than we're stronger. It's not solving the issues of emotional problems that young people have that sometimes make them act up. It's not solving the problem of dysfunction that may exist in a household where there might be physical abuse or drug abuse or other issues going on. The programs we have in place help to remedy that because it brings resources and it takes a good look at the household to ensure we're strengthening these families and our children. I mean, it appalls me, it makes me mad, it makes me angry that we're still here having these kind of debate in our community, in our nation. And it's just making me crazy, to be honest with you. please let me know what department it is so that we can actually ensure that the public knows.
Yes, that department is Coconut Creek.
Explain what happened.
There were 3 citations issued that we, upon trying to enter them, realized that they were in the Promise program. We notified notified the agency's contact, and the agency did withdraw 2, but one of them was not withdrawn. They wanted the youth to go through civil citation.
And the other agency were which ones that did the right thing?
I believe it was the same agency.
All 3 of them was from Coconut Creek?
Well, if I told you that I would surprise.
Oh, no, okay, no, I want to stand corrected. I want to make that correction. The 2 that were actually withdrawn were from BSO. The one from Coconut Creek, they wanted to remain in the program.
As I started to say, if you had said that Coconut Creek was the one that did the right thing, I would have been shocked. If you said Coconut Creek wanted to punish the kid no matter what, then I would not. I'm not surprised. So thank you, Colonel Holmes. And I've been telling y'all about Coconut Creek since forever, since they started showing up on DJJ's report as having the highest number of arrests in the state of Florida since DOJ contacted me regarding Coconut Creek constantly showing up on the report for arresting children, and what the children look like. Chief Evans.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to return back to Judge Holmes's comment about the data piece. I think the sophistication of, and sophistication may be an exaggeration of the development of the statute, because its intent is clear on its surface. When they wrote 985.12, they grouped them together. And so that challenge of the separate column comes with that, but I will certainly take that back as a recommendation for consideration. But also in that same, in 985.12 in 2018 is when the removal of the limitation of 3 came out. And so I know you love to do research, so I'm going to give you the Senate bill and the law number. The Senate Bill 1392, Chapter Law 2018-127, and I can put that in the chat for you for your convenience. So that's when it happened. But something else I think in the logistics of the discussion that we haven't discussed, but certainly happens, is I think we are, and rightfully so, thinking that the promise and the civil citation offense are happening simultaneously and there is no miscommunication. Keep in mind that a young person can go home and tell the parent as to what happened to them in school. Law enforcement can come out and respond and choose to issue a civil citation, and never what happened in school is known to that agency, right, for the offense, and it will still be identified similarly as a school-based offense as we have on the delinquency side. So we may have some other factors to consider, but that does happen in other programmatic pieces where the offense is not, although it happened at the school, they're handled completely in complete isolation of one another. So just wanted to add that in as a consideration as we look at what do we do now with our designs.
But Promise is strictly school-based, and that's what we're discussing right now. We understand that stuff may happen later on and out of custody. We're talking strictly school-based arrests, a school-based Promise incidents, and data that's being entered. Judge Holmes.
Just so that this record is clear, as Mr. Walters likes to say, Ms. Evans, if you recall the discussions and the heated discussions we had when we were trying to draft the civil citation plan for Broward County, in the 2020 version, 3 is the limit. And if you recall the discussions I had with Mr. Pryor, that, to separate the the offenses. He wanted separate offenses. Yeah, I think Miss Gloria is on here too, that we had to cajole and beg to, if 3 incidents happen in one night, that's 1 citation. They're same part of the same transaction. So I'm aware of 2018, but you got to look at the most current statute, and sometimes the legislature leaves things out. They don't tell you that they repealed it, or they just left it out. So if you'll go back and check your notes from the heated debate that we had when we were trying to draft the current civil citation, 3 was the number that Mr. Pryor agreed upon. I'm not rewriting the statute. I know the law, and I love reading it, as you say, but I just wanted to point that out, that was what the state attorney, the duly elected state attorney, agreed upon, 3 as the maximum.
And respectfully, Judge Holmes, I believe that was a local practice, but I will certainly go back and ensure, but it was removed from statute, I believe, and others may.
But we can only go on what the state attorney is going to work with.
Correct.
Okay, so no matter what the statute is saying, Mr. Pryor only agreed to 3. So, I'm not going to sue the man because I want the program.
Right. Understood.
So if you check your notes, that's what he agreed upon.
Correct, absolutely. And I think that even goes back to the previous state attorney. That's what Mr. Sachs had agreed to.
Well, I think Sachs agreed to, because 3 was the number. That's why he agreed to it. Mr. Weeks, you had your hand up.
Madam President, I wanted to circle back on the Coconut Creek. It was my understanding that there were some representations made by, I don't want to speak on behalf of nobody else's office, but on behalf of the state attorney's office, on getting these departments to fall in line or sign on this civil citation agreement and adopt it. I just wanted to get some feedback on where we at with that, particularly with Coconut Creek.
Gloria?
Gordon, are you referring to civil citation now?
Yeah.
Oh, they were in support of it.
Apparently not so, based on what we're hearing from.
We're talking about promise though right now, so I can't tell you.
They issued a civil citation, and when brought to them that there was some probably error in their double issuing, where BSO recognized the issue and withdrew it.
I heard that.
Coconut Creek.
Okay, Gloria, let him finish, and then I'll let him finish. I'll give you the same courtesy. So finish your question, and then Gloria, go ahead.
Coconut Creek pushed forward. So to me, if I'm incorrect in my recollection of what you relayed, I believe it was a civil citation issue that BSO corrected and Coconut Creek did not. And I was wondering, if they sign on and they support of it, why are they not given the deference when necessary to move forward?
Well, I was going to ask Tamika, how long ago was that case? Was that a recent one, or was that prior to the signing of the civil citation MOU?
So that was recent. And again, to be clear, the 3 youth that we're referring to are youth who had been referred to Promise and who are also issued a citation, where BSO, when they were notified, pulled their civil citations back. But I'm gonna see if I have the date. That was, we got notification from them November 2nd.
Okay, so the only thing I can suggest in that circumstance is, and this goes for all law enforcement agencies, they're not, again, mandated to issue a civil citation. The whole point of Tamika and I meeting with each agency, and we are scheduled to still meet with Coconut Creek, because the last meeting that we had scheduled, we felt we did not have all of the appropriate law enforcement people at the table in order to get the message across. But having said that, these agencies still have the ability to issue a civil citation despite our desires. what State Attorney Pryor has made clear, and what I am making clear when I have these meetings with Tamika and myself and these agencies, is that if they do not issue that civil citation to an eligible youth, my office is going to issue it anyway. I don't know, I mean, Tamika communicates with me almost daily, so that if something like this comes up, in fact, she had brought this to my attention, but we knew we were going to be having this meeting, and I can't speak to how. I would echo the sentiments of Judge Holmes. I've been sitting here thinking the whole time, why can't we just, it sounds like an IT problem to me, and trust me, it's over my head because I am not electronically inclined, but it just seems like we need to create a column that could, at least at this juncture, eliminate some of this issue that we've had for a couple of years now. This was brought to Maria's attention, almost 2 years ago. So anyway, having said that, Gordon, I can only say to you that that agency, any agency, still has the ability to issue a civil citation, regardless of what the MOU is. And the point of meeting with these agencies is to discourage them from issuing civil citation with eligible youth. We are going to be meeting with Coconut Creek. They are signed on to civil citation. You were there for the ceremonial signing of this document. And so that individual officer may be the one who is not getting the message. That's the point of us meeting with law enforcement agencies, to make sure that it's getting in the trenches, because as I've said many times at these meetings, I believe that is definitely part of the equation, is getting to the trenches, getting to the boots on the ground. It'll probably be the same thing for Promise, to be honest with you. I think some of this mix-up sometimes is simply because SROs need to be educated on when a youth is Promise eligible and the school district is issuing that youth to go to Promise, it should not be double dipping into civil citation. And Tamika and I just had this conversation last week that we thought the next set of concert tour we should have, if you will, should be that we're meeting with SROs and educating SROs on, I wish we had the SRO, the chief of SROs at the table today. I think it could eliminate some of the issues, hopefully some of the loopholes where the youth are getting put into two different programs. But I'm sorry, Gordon, if that doesn't really answer your question, other than it's probably a case-by-case thing. And going forward, I can assure you, I'm going to be making it clear where the state attorney's office stands on civil citation, as well as this board. And hopefully we'll get them to, we've had other agencies change their minds. I think Tamika could attest to that I've persuaded them that just issue the civil citation. It would save all of us a lot of time and energy. That'll be my goal with Coconut Creek as well.
Thank you, Gloria. Gordon, Coconut Creek has never supported civil citation. The district has always struggled with Coconut Creek regarding that. I remember they told, when Barterman was on the board, they told her that, I don't want to do that. It makes my arrest percentage go down, and, all these sorts of things. So, and I said that to Josh Rydell, who's the commissioner in charge of them. He pretended he didn't know. I said, just look at the facts. It's not it's not a secret, but they are, the leadership there, not this current chief, not the one before him, really cared about civil citation, and they are the police, and they're going to be the police there. So we may have to try a better mousetrap for them, for Coconut Creek. I wanted to ask Carly Shaw, Ms. Shaw, Dr. Shaw, have you give us the update? I know that there was a decision made yesterday on mandatory masking in the schools. Dr. Shaw? Dr. Hickman?
I can respond, ma'am. Thank you.
Right ahead.
So certainly, yes, there was a decision made yesterday to strongly encourage masks around Broward County Public Schools for students, employees, visitors, anyone on our campuses or in our buildings. The second part of that is that we're also going to follow the guidance from the Florida Department of Health in terms of quarantining for students. What that means is parents now have a right, sole discretion, to send their child to school or not if they have been in direct contact with a person who's been exposed to COVID. And so that is the guidance from the Department of Health that came out, would have known the date yesterday, but it's been more than a month, almost 2 months now. We have not been following that guidance. We've been following the previous guidance was that if a student was exposed to a COVID patient, a COVID positive person, that they could return to school after the 5th day with a negative test. Right now, the governor, according to the Parents' Bill of Rights, is making it the parents' choice, and we fall in alignment with that. We've also, again, lifted the mask mandate. So masks are not mandated in public schools, but they will continue to be strongly encouraged. But I do have another, if you don't mind, one other thing that's going on to help us try to mitigate the spread. But through our partnership with the Florida Department of Health in Broward, we began vaccinations today. Let me start over because the message has been out there that it's a little different. We are allowing and making available vaccinations at schools. It is still voluntary and it requires parental consent. So we're not mandating vaccinations for students. The vaccination for the 5 through 11-year-olds was just made available last week. We started today making them available at our elementary schools, and that will last from now until we're done. We have 140 elementary schools, so we'll be doing making it about 14 per day for the first dose. Then we'll come back around in 3 weeks for those schools and do the second doses. And then we will start doing the middle schools after the winter break. And I'll pause to take any questions or anything else you have, Chair.
Okay. So the discipline that was written into code and matrix on last year, that is all obsolete when it comes to mask, correct?
When it comes to, yes, because it's strongly encouraged, so yes.
So yeah, so there's nothing really if a kid doesn't wear a mask, there's nothing anybody can do about it nowadays.
That's correct. All we do is we strongly encourage and educate. That goes for kids, students, and adults.
Okay. Any questions surrounding the no more masks and mandatory masks? Judge Holmes.
I apologize. Dr. Hickman, Dade County is doing a policy of opt-out to just get a parental signature. Is that what Broward is doing also? Dade County has a website. They told the parents to go on and sign the opt-out form. I know why they're doing it. It's to cut down on liability. So that if their child contracts COVID while in school, the school doesn't incur any liability because they opt out of letting the child wear a mask. So is that something that Broward is going to be doing?
No, ma'am, we're not requiring a parent's signature to opt out. It's commendable that Dade is going to try that, and I wouldn't speak against that. Let me tell you what we see. Number one, you have a kid that the parent has opted out and that form has been sent in, and that kid is walking around the building. How do you know that the child hasn't opted out if you were to say anything to him about putting on a mask, unless he's gonna wear that form? So that would be kind of difficult to, let's say, I'll use the word police, but no offense to anyone on the call, but it's kind of difficult to be able to monitor that.
Well, no. What they're doing in Dade is everybody's taking their mask off.
Okay.
But the parents are saying, the school, Cavallo has said, look, just as a precaution, just let us know that you have opted out on behalf of your child. Okay. And because they don't really have to wear a mask by Judge Newman's order that came out Friday. But the schools are still requiring, and I know why they're doing it, and it may, be in the best interest of Broward since there's a lot of fighting and litigious parents, but I'm not your general counsel. I just wanted to know what Broward was doing.
I appreciate that advice, and this begins on the 20th of November. And so we have time now that we've, that the board has made the decision to put the process in place. So that may be something that we have to come back to consider. But as of now, it's just been strongly encouraged. So let me say this, at the high school, it's been strongly encouraged since last week. It's been probably a week and 2 days. And we still see the students at the high school level have continued to wear the face covering. And it's similar to what you see in the community. Just because you say, okay, it's not required, or it's not required, you still know that COVID is still there. The percentages have gone down. Yeah, the percentage in Broward is about 2% in terms of the positivity rate. However, the CDC still recognizes that Broward has a community spread issue, and that we should be cautious. We still should mitigate. We still should wash our hands. The CDC, the AAP has lifted the ban. They're still recommending universal masking for everyone indoors. So, but we're still, and I know we're on a public setting and we shouldn't talk about personal, but my 2 kids are gonna wear a mask to school. And I'm not opting out. But a fight that I have with my wife is about vaccinating this 9-year-old child of mine. But I have the weekend to work that out. So anyway, thank you.
Good luck with that, Doc. I think you're gonna need it. Well, my son is a teacher and he will be wearing his mask. If I have to do some drive-bys, he's is anyone checked on the clerk of the court on their procedures for dealing with civil citation eligible students that may have come? Has that happened? Is there a process in place? Mr. Weeks?
Madam Chair, I was just acknowledging there is a process in place, but I think the state attorney's office was in the position to handle that.
Okay. Have there been any cases to come through?
No, Madam Chair. We have a process in place. We haven't seen any come through that none have been presented that should have gone to civil citation so far.
Okay. Thank you. Or none of them went to civil citation that should have. Okay. Colonel Holmes, you all should be getting ready for, I think your shift pick was up, and you all should be getting ready for the change, I think, in January.
Yes.
For the dually certified staff over at the Jack.
Yes, I just got an update on that, and everything is a go. We should have someone in place for January with no issues, no concerns.
Okay. And are you also working on the process that if by chance one of the children who is civil citation eligible is presented at the Jack, how that process would work?
Yes, we have that in place, so we should be good to go. Like I said, we will have a cross-certified person to, just in case things slip through the cracks, as a secondary backup to handle that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And so there were some agencies, I think Springs, Plantation, and Lighthouse Point, that had some internal exclusions for issuance of civil citations. Their update, has anyone spoken to those agencies? And so if the state attorney's plan, a civil citation plan and program, allows for those children to be issued civil citation, and the agency decides that, and in many cases they have, I think they're going to review their internal policies, present that. How will those children's cases be handled at the state attorney's office?
So I think the answer to your question, if I'm understanding your question, is that if that civil citation is issued by one of those agencies, for example, and it goes to, or rather, civil citation is not issued, that's what you're asking, correct, Madam Chair?
Right.
Right. For an eligible offense, we're going to send that civil citation to Tamika's program. And I believe we're going to set up a waiver of speedy trial, or what's been set up and discussed with Dennis Alsbury, who obviously runs our diversion program, would be that he would have them fill out a waiver of speedy trial in a similar fashion as they do now through law enforcement with Tamika.
So since diversion is an arrest and civil citation is pre-arrest, so essentially the child would be kind of unarrested from the diversion side and put into civil citation?
Well, that would be the goal. The problem is I cannot unarrest child. So the obstacle that's in front of us is just exactly that we can still send that child to civil citation rather than diversion, which of course is what we normally would do. But I don't know how to answer the question, and Tamika and I have been discussing this and gone round and round, how we would avoid the fact that they've already been, I think she has something in place that we've talked about. She can answer that better than me. Something where has to reach out to the law enforcement officer. Is that correct, Tamika, where you've reached out in the past to have them accept that they're in civil citation, or am I incorrect about that?
So from our end, our process would start once we actually receive a referral from whatever agency, including the state attorney office. Once we receive that referral, we would start making efforts to contact the family. And once we contact that family, we would do our regular process. It obviously depends on if there has already been a referral signed for the state attorney. My understanding is our office can't do the waiver of speedy trial, but there may be something the state attorney is putting in place with Dennis for him to be able to do so. But from our office, when we get the civil citation referral, just like from any other agency, we'll start our efforts of actually reaching out to the family and trying to get that face-to-face contact with them so they can get enrolled in the program.
So I want to hear from the lawyers here. How does, if you have these agencies, and I think one of them was really fond of lording and prowling, and the state attorney's office is saying, this is the program, we'd like you to participate. They're making up their own rules and saying, we disagree with that part. But clearly, under the current civil citation statute and program, the child is eligible. How do we, if the state attorney is so inclined, how do we move that kid out of the diversion process? And the paperwork is a concern, because now you have an arrest record and you move into a pre-arrest program. How do we make that work to move a kid from diversion to civil citation?
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
I think that all exists within the state attorney's purview and in their wheelhouse. The civil citation plan for Broward County is mandated for Broward County, absent them having their own that is duly being operated and approved by the state attorney. So the state attorney can decide that if he recognizes it and they're eligible for civil citation, they can issue the civil citation. It's the question of who is the law enforcement officer that's going to do that. They can go back to the arresting agency and have that officer or another officer in that agency issue it. Or, if they have sworn officers within their office, they may be able to do it internally. I think that's a matter of mechanics for them to figure out how to do. But the intent is, we have a program in Broward County, and these departments need to adopt the program for Broward County. They can't just go out and do what they want. We have a program, they need to follow what we're doing. And that's it. And the state attorney needs to make that very clear to them through their actions. Dismiss the case, no prosecute the case, or don't go forward on the case until they understand they're going to follow the mandate of the state attorney.
If I may, the state attorney Pryor's position is, to follow up with what Gordon is just saying, is that obviously we do have the ability to just send it to civil citation. We don't feel there's any need to sign off on anything or what have you. We're going to send that to civil citation, just like I would just direct a case to diversion. The obstacle that we have in our way is, and this is what Tamika and I have discussed, and I met with Dennis a couple of weeks ago, is that if that child is taken to the jack, that when that youth is taken to the jack, they're already now, and this has been the concern of this board, they're already in the system. They've already taken the ride, they've already had an attached number to their name. And I don't control that. Our agency does not control that. When I met with Dennis and then I followed up with Tamika, and this is where I was going to speak with Chief Evans, I think it's going to be incumbent upon their intake processors to not issue anything at the jack and give Dennis an opportunity to review the case to make sure that the youth is eligible, and then we can send it to civil citation. But once it's entered into the clerk system from their intake personnel at the jack, which we don't control, they're already assigned some kind of a number. Now we can send it to civil citation and then note that they have successfully completed civil citation. If they do, and it'll show a successful completion. But if it's the board's desire, which I believe it is, to avoid that, that tag of a number to a youth, that happens at intake. And I don't control the ride in the patrol car, to the extent that I'm trying to discourage that, which is why we've been meeting with agencies, to Gordon's point. Once they're at the jack, and if it happens in the middle of the night, I have nobody there. So I have to understand the process from Chief Evans' perspective, from BSO. I did meet with Sarah with BSO, and I tried to understand. I took a walkthrough to understand how it physically happens, but I don't control that part of it. So this is a good dialogue to have.
That's where Colonel Holmes comes in as part of him removing staff, working within their own agency, and then perfecting, if I'm not mistaken, Colonel, perfecting that process for those children who arrive, who should have been issued a civil citation. So you're working on that process. That's part of your plan, is it not?
Yes, the way that we have our protocol set up is that once a juvenile comes to Jack and it's determined that they're eligible for a civil citation program, if they were brought in by BSO, that's easy.
Right.
That's our protocol. We can fix that right there. If they're brought in by another agency, our staff will reach out to that agency, because there are times where an officer from another agency may bring a juvenile down to Jack, and just say they're in Coral Springs. They may make it all the way back to Coral Springs. We contacted and advised them that they're eligible for a civil citation. They may say, oh, you know what? Wow, I screwed up. Okay, you can have, your staff down there go ahead and do it. I'm not coming all the way back. Or you can have a situation where an officer, it may be at the end of their shift, they may be home sleeping, and we may not be able to get in touch with them, et cetera, et cetera. And our staff down at Jack can handle a civil citation. But we have those protocols in place to make sure, or if they're totally against it, then guess what? It falls under the civil citation opportunity that should be handled between the state attorney's office and their command with that agency. So those are our protocols that are in place. So like I said, within our agency, it's real easy. It'll be handled simply. But dealing with outside agencies, we will make an effort to contact that officer to advise them that it's a missed opportunity. We can correct that problem, that issue right there at the Jack.
Let me ask you, there was, Colonel, some years ago, there was an effort to get, I believe it was through I think Maria was working on that along with Chief Evans, to get an assigned agreement, so that if it said the agreement was in place saying that if you had an eligible child, you could automatically give them civil citation, and you would then, the idea was to have the Jack show it, the letter or the MOU signed by the chief of police, and you wouldn't have to call anybody. You could just, do that space. If is that something that your agency is interested in? For example, Major Lunder, does Fort Lauderdale, since you're speaking on behalf of Fort Lauderdale, you told me you were empowered. Does Fort Lauderdale agree that if a child is eligible, and I believe you do, to be given a civil citation. However, your guy or lady has shown up at the Jack. Is Fort Lauderdale one of those agencies again that will allow BSO to offer that child civil citation with the chief's signature and without having to wake somebody up in the middle of the night or whatever the case may be? That as a matter of policy and protocol.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the officer wouldn't transfer it to juvenile if they were eligible. And we rely on Jack to give us that information on whether or not the juvenile is eligible.
But just in case you got some new people and that child reached the Jack and they're there, does your department have a problem with BSO issuing a civil citation? And would Larry be able to be willing to put that in writing?
I don't think that would be an issue.
Okay. Chief Evans, do you remember that document?
Madam Chair, I remember discussion of the document. It was always housed in the Office of Justice Services, similar document. So I can't say I recall seeing it, but I do know what you're speaking of.
Gloria, if you talk to Maria, she would remember because she spent a lot of time working on that. And there were some agencies that had agreed upon that, and then you had your Coconut Creeks doing that piece. It did exist, and she worked on it for quite some time. So I guess the question would be, would other agencies agree as well? And we can work on that. Chief Evans, COVID in the juvenile detention center. What you got?
Yes, ma'am. The facility is currently under quarantine until tomorrow, based on a staff testing positive.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Judge Williams, I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the unarrest issue really quick. I had a case last week where a guy was arrested for possession of marijuana. The judge found possession of marijuana at some detention hearing, the weekend judge. By the time I got the report, they had it, actually it was charged possession of Flocka. Everybody found Flocka, the clerk's office, the judge on the weekend, and it was Flocka. I looked at the reports, it was marijuana. We tried to get the report corrected. Let me tell you something. We had to go through unions. We had to go through the police departments, Colonel Holmes. The clerk's office refused to budge because the law says that once you create a public record, it has a state and you can't unarrest a person, basically, like even change the charge. So what I would suggest, Ms. Michelle, is when I was at BSO, we'd have a case where, let's say a deputy was caught throwing a rock on a suspect and writing up a false report. I didn't want that to go into the system. So I found a way to unarrest the person by simply not inputting it into computer data. We just kept a file folder of raw documents, but it never got into a computer system. So the person never reflected an arrest if a deputy's throwing a rock on you or putting a rock on you and so forth. So I would ask you, Ms. Michelle, to talk to Terrence Lynch and to ask him what's BSO's procedure for unarresting people for whatever reason, because you don't want that to be in a computer database. Now, if it stays in a file, that's fine, because again, you can't alter or destroy a public record. It's a misdemeanor in Florida law. But talk to Terrence Lynch about how I can't think of how I did it, but I would always unarrest a person if it was for justice or a person was unfairly arrested.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
To that same point of Judge Williams, this is the dilemma. Once the youth has arrived at the assessment center, to Judge Holmes, she's spoken this many times before, the ride in the car has already happened, right? So we've done damage that way. But the challenging piece is that you've transferred custody legally from one agency to the next. So as we dust off the previous practice, we are going to have to make this stop happen at the Sally Port, because the department nor BSO need to start the process. Once we have the child inside and we've started JGIS, it automatically imports into the BSO system. So the charges, the footprints are already been made in the sand. So again, as we revisit this this MOU or agreement, I respectfully ask that we step back a step to to even not allowing the kid in the facility.
And I think that, thank you, Chief, and I think that was brought up to the Colonel as well, as far as where, if they would be stopped outside the facility to confirm prior to, because once they coming through the gate and walk through, then yes. So I think there is a way to verify prior to them entering your facility, Colonel, that you'll need to work on, of your new staff. So it'll probably be something you'll be working on, training those individuals on. Back to COVID, you said you're on lockdown until tomorrow. Mr. Weeks, are your lawyers there? Mr. Watkins, are your teachers there?
They're not there now, but they have been visiting the facility. We've had a number of very serious, high-profile arrests as of late, and they've been visiting to check in on those children. I was just made aware that it was placed on lockdown again. And it's always frustrating every time a facility with children is on lockdown because of COVID. We're not reporting any issues in the courthouse. The courthouse is reopened. Masks are now optional within the courthouse. We still have a mask mandate within our office, and I believe other agencies are doing that within the courthouse, but the courthouse is open and folks are back doing without masks.
Mr. Watkins?
So yes, the teachers are there. And, I think I wanted to, clarify, and maybe Cassandra can speak to it. But when they refer to quarantine, the facility interprets that as visitors, people who are not assigned there are restricted from entry, such as parents, visitors, people who are coming in and out. However, the nurses, the therapists, the teachers who are assigned there as their work location are still reporting there, as long as they did not have contact or close contact with a person who had tested positive. So that's the interpretation that we've received. The person in question was a staff that was at night and had not been there for a week or two prior to the incident. So they are there and working.
Okay.
You're correct. Those are deemed to be non-essential staff and non-essential folks to be in the facility. You're correct.
Okay. Thank you. Colonel Holmes. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get. Do you have the population today, Mr. Chief Evans?
Yes, ma'am. As of 10 o'clock this morning, the report was 26 youth, with 24 being male and 2 being female.
Thank you. Colonel Holmes?
Yes, we currently have 9 juveniles at our Paul Ryan facility. We have 0 confirmed COVID-19 cases there. They're all taking classes. There's 2 teachers that are in attendance teaching there. All juveniles have access to mental health services and behavioral services. So there are no issues there. In our entire system right now, as of today, we only have 1 positive case for inmates, which is amazing. We've come a long ways. We only have 1 there. And as far as employees with the sheriff's office, we have a total of 7. We've come a long ways. And in our detention facilities, we have 2. So, that's pretty good.
Thank you. Ms. Gaynor, missed opportunities?
Okay, so the department hasn't provided any missed opportunities from October. There was an issue with their system, so we don't have a report.
Okay. Chief
Madam
Evans,
Chair?
what's wrong with y'all system now? Yes.
Like everything, it needs a refresh. I pulled the data and it went back to, I think, May. I was like, oh, that's absolutely not correct. So I sent it up for a refresh of the statewide database, and as soon as I confirm that it's been done, it'll come out.
Okay. Colonel?
Madam Chair, during the last reporting period, we did have one missed opportunity. However, it was due to a domestic case. We did our investigation and determined that it actually was not a missed opportunity. It was a battery during a domestic case where the juvenile had to be arrested.
So you are still doing your audits of your domestic violence cases for children?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Is there, Mr. Weeks, if you wanted to talk about the juvenile detention center?
Yes, I did. We had another community meeting with the stakeholders and folks of interest with respect to moving the juvenile detention center, what we would like to refer to as an enrichment academy for our children, and not a jail or a cage forward. And that conversation is moving. We visited Tallahassee earlier last week, or is it this week? I can't remember what week it is because it's a blur. But we visited Tallahassee and met with the Secretary of DJJ, met with the Secretary of DCF. And I did that because I thought it was important that this advisory board have some level of representation at the highest level, making an ask directly for support on this issue. So I went hand in hand and begged for some money. and I'm not too proud to beg, especially when it's for the interests of our children. So I asked the secretary for support in her budget, and then for future support in her future budgets to do what has been recognized by the department. We need a new facility here in Broward County. Unfortunately, the department has already put their budget in for this legislative year, and we're learning some timelines that we have to meet. Next year, before June, we have to get the department to commit to put this in their budget. But we did do a fallback. We went from legislator to legislator, representative to senator, and asked them to put in a request individually for appropriations of the money for planning. We had some interest and we had some support from some of those legislators. I'm going to hold back from putting them on blast or giving them praise until I actually see it get submitted. And we'll circle back to see if it is actually in an appropriations request from the folks that we spoke to. I have to give great thanks to Ella Phillips for helping me navigate this gauntlet of Tallahassee, and also to Madam President and Judge Holmes for advising on how and who and what to see and what to say and things of that sort. But we're going to continue to push. I think DJJ has recognized that Broward County is very, very active and very, very much in need of a center. If we don't get it this time, we'll get it next time, but we're never going to give up on my children. I think they're very clear as to that. We're going to continue meeting with our subcommittee, and I think we have a very good plan, at least for this year, to move it forward. We shared our legislative agenda with every member of the delegation, Broward delegation, and folks outside of our delegations to try to get support. And hopefully, if we get this appropriation bills put in and we get everyone making calls and activating their spheres of influence, that we can get this first initial 200,000 appropriations. My understanding, and you guys can tell me if you heard differently, that the state of Florida is not in a financial crisis this year. There seems to be a good revenue return, and money for the operation of the government seems to be there. And the reason I say that is because some other years I've heard very clear from the very beginning that, hey, we got shortfalls, we got shortfalls. And once you hear the term shortfalls, that means don't ask for nothing because you're not getting anything. We have not heard those conversations on the wind about shortfall. So I'm thinking that the revenue projections for Florida are looking relatively good. These are things that are far beyond I ever thought I would be following through on. But it seems you got to look at all this stuff before you go up and ask for considerable capital outlays for Broward County. So with that being said, there seems to be no revenue shortfalls. COVID has not put us in a pinch. The state of Florida is opening and travel is very, very active. Folks are spending money. I mean, that money that came down for the stimulus really did get us through this COVID break. Hopefully we can get this $200,000 and additional $5 million that we're going to need for Broward County. So that's my report for the committee. But I also want to just reserve some time at the end. I just want to say something for the good of the order.
Okay, we've got 7 minutes. Mr. Lagon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Weeks, and to the chair and to the board, with your recommendation that you recommended, that you say you spoke with the secretary on, it would be good to also add that into your innovation zones, innovation report while you all are doing your annual reports and all the other reports. And we're on my end, I can say, speak from my end on prevention. We are really reviewing those reports so that they don't just be reports of paper you're sitting in, but we're going to look at issues that you all are targeting to try to help those areas. So the innovation zone is where you can request funding also. So try to do your innovation zone, add that what you're talking about that you spoke with the secretary on. Like you say, it may not be nothing available now, but we know it's in your report, and we can make sure we bring it up to our leadership team here in prevention so that we can do what we can to try to support any area that we can on your circuit.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Anything for the good of the order? We've got 6 minutes. Okay. Dr. Hickman.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to share that, some good news in the times of coming back from COVID is two things. One is our re-enrollment campaign. I know a lot have heard about us going out door to door, door knocking and trying to find students. We've finally come to a point where we can report that from like 14,000 students were missing, we resolved a high number of those to the result of 1,100 students have returned and re-enrolled in school. We have about 3,500 more that we haven't been able to find just yet, which says that we were able to resolve about 9,000. So currently, for the past 2 years, we started off at 14,000, but now there's about 3,500 that we haven't found. 1,000 have returned, and we're still working to find those. Some of that benefit to the district is, at approximately $70,000 or $8,000 per student. That's roughly $8.5 million in not revenue, but in FTE for students returning to school, just with that project alone. But with the other 3,500 is where we are going to our phase 3, and we have to go, and we want to work with our community and make opportunities for our community to assist in that work. Through some of the CARES money, some of the ARP funds, we'll be able to offer some type of incentive, so it's not just voluntary. But that's more to come, but I just wanted to throw that out, that there is a population of student that's out there that we still need to find. And then the next part of it is I see, I know Judge Williams and my team are on here, and they've been working with law enforcement in terms of addressing the violence in school, the threats in schools, the disruptive behavior in school, and just our students who have returned to school from all areas of the county who have been at home for 18 months. They have been not socialized. They have returned into rule, structure, order, and they have not yet adjusted. And so some things that we've put in place, and I'll let Mr. Walker speak. But a few weeks ago, we started what was called School Pride and Peace Week. And it was about being proud of where you are, being proud of your school. We also promoted some hashtags where we were trying to break the internet instead of letting TikTok break our district. but putting some positive messages out there. We were successful with that, but that was just a kickoff. And then that led into some other discussions. And so, Mr. Walker, if you don't mind, and if Mr. Watkins, you want to jump in after Mr. Walker, that'll be fine.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Hickman. And like Dr. Hickman mentioned, we kicked off with the School Pride and Peace Week with the idea that we want ongoing reconnection to school, knowing that the kids some of them have been in their homes for the last 18 months. And one of the main things that they've developed is using social media, Instagram, TikTok, and all those different type of outlets. And a lot of them are not using them correctly. And a lot of the violence and fighting and things that happen in schools are connected to social media. So we're trying to develop common language like see something, say something. We're all pretty familiar with that. We're putting out there, think before you post. And we're communicating that to all the law enforcement agencies as well as the schools throughout the district to keep emphasizing that message. We need to think before we post, and we have a curriculum that's going to be delivered to the schools to help the kids learn how to utilize social media correctly. And in addition to that, we've had like a pilot program of Choose Peace, Stop Violence. And it was in collaboration with United Way in about 15 schools in the district. And we're now looking at pushing out that curriculum and that student movement throughout all the schools in the district. And that's a process that we're working on this school year and hoping to continue it throughout the years, and basically educating our children about choosing peaceful methods rather than violence. Thank you.
Madam President, it's almost 5 o'clock. I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting for 5 minutes so that we may hear all of the good for the order.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, is there any unreadiness? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those against, nay. Ayes have it. Let's go. Okay. Mr. Robel, you had your hand up. Okay, don't use the whole 5 minutes. Use 1 minute of that. Okay.
Now I won't be that this long.
Okay.
I know I can tend to be long-winded. I'm gonna like my wife and act like me.
I got the timer on you now. Okay.
I'm happy to report that recently Community-Based Connection have stepped out in a new initiative surrounding mental health. We are happy about this new direction. Many of you all know in the past, we started to work off with juvenile prevention from me standing up in court in Judge Elijah Williams courtroom and coming aboard in office with a book bag on my back and knocking on Madam President's door saying, hey, I'm here to serve the community, and calling Cassandra every day. Point is, y'all, we're in the mental health lane now. We have secured over $500,000, actually 1.1 million that we have coming in total to do work around juvenile justice, mental health. This is a new lane, but we believe that those who look like the community are in the best position to serve the community. And that's the model we live by. And it's in all our proposals. So we don't plan on changing that. And so we are who we always say we'll be. And that's to be a beacon of hope for the community. So we are happy to be in this new lane. So all those people I just named, I'll be knocking back on your door again and many more. Dr. Hickman, my frat, I'll be knocking on your door. Well, Mr. Walker, all of you all on here, that we are back in the juvenile mental health.
All right, that's time. Be prepared next month for a short presentation. Okay. Colonel, I got you on the clock for 1 minute.
Okay, I'll be quick. One of the things that we're doing here with the sheriff's office, myself and the undersheriff are going around the roll calls to express to our deputies to understand that there's a mental health crisis out there and to have some patience and understanding when dealing with people. We've all post the pandemic have dealt with issues. No one's exempt from it. And it's important for our deputies to understand that. And you know, whether they're dealing with adults or juveniles, especially with the holiday seasons approaching us too, there's going to be a lot of people depressed and hurting. So we're stressing to our troops to understand that and just to have patience with people.
Thank you. I believe when I met with Chief of Fort Lauderdale, you all talked about ramping up your CIT
Yes, we're actually looking into bringing it in-house so that we can get more training opportunities.
And they had quite a bit of a number of officers who were CIT trained, and so that's an important piece, particularly in different sections of our community. So we realize that the wellness of our children and our officers as well is important as we move through this, because we got to do something better. I wanted to just in a couple of minutes, as in that same meeting, I was talking to the chief, and I mentioned we were talking about civil citation and diversion, that sort of thing, and marijuana arrest, and there was a issue about, this is for Dale Holmes, Commissioner, I hope you're on. I'm not sure if you all have had that meeting yet, Major, regarding the adult marijuana civil citation program. Victor, have you all had that conversation yet with the county regarding their program? Because I believe that Larry, the chief, was unfamiliar a couple of weeks ago. So if you all have not had that conversation, I would be happy if you would get together, so that I'm not sure at what level Fort Lauderdale is participating, Commissioner Holness, but I think there is an opportunity there for them to really embrace it under the new leadership.
Absolutely. So let me say that it's not just for marijuana possession. It mirrors what we're doing for juveniles. Pretty much all those offenses that juveniles get citation for now applies to adults. We started off with marijuana a few years ago. I changed that about 2-3 years ago, and it now includes loitering, it includes shoplifting, it includes battery that's not aggravated, where someone gets hurt or damaged. We have that in place, and unless the city opts out, they're in. So it is there for every police department to put in place. And what we find is this, Madam President, that those who benefit the most from this are still young people, because with civil citation, 18 years and 1 day, you don't qualify anymore. Most of the people who benefit from this are young people who are under 26 years old. And the science says that their brains are still developing. So we must stop being the country with the most people in prison. And we must stop incarcerating Black and brown people. 17% of the population in the state of Florida is Black, yet 47% of the people in prison are Black.
I think you're absolutely right. I want you, if you will please connect, your staff connect with Major London and Chief, so we can make sure that Fort Lauderdale will opt in if they haven't already. They
don't need to opt in. It's there. They just got to utilize.
They need to opt in, participating within their agency. So there's new leadership there, as a new mindset that's going on. And so if you will share that information with him, he's very open-minded, or he has been so far. So I expect that to continue.
I'll work with Ms. Gaynor to set something up. Thank you so much.
Okay. And
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Do you even need to end or extend?
You interrupted me. I was about to end it.
Madam Chair, can I say one thing? Just 10 seconds. This right here represents September 1st to November 3rd, the Baker Acts in the community of Broward County. 1,100 Baker Acts of children. Of those 1,100, 10 petitions have been filed. We'll talk about it a little bit in more depth.
We'll talk about it on the next meeting. I'm also, you all know, just full disclosure, the NAACP is, we have litigation filed against the Palm Beach County School District regarding Baker Acts from our schools, because there is an epidemic in the nation, about 35,000 a year. With that being said, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you next month. Some of them I'll talk to you much sooner. Thank you. Enjoy.